Welcome to ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigrilla Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor and leadership coach. In this podcast, I share ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways in which plants can help you lead a naturally conscious life. Hello, everyone. I am back. It is episode 4 of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom, and I am so excited to be here. I realized that I literally jumped right into the heart of the matter with the first 3 episodes because I was so caught up in sharing with you about the conditioning that I didn't think to stop and maybe, tell you a little bit about who I am, since it's not a given that you necessarily know who I am. Or at least hear about my plant story, because if we're going to be talking about plant wisdom, it might be a little bit useful for me to get into exactly how the heck I got in here. I was recently asked, what in my personal history, this is the way the person put it, what is it in your personal history that drew you to the study of plants? And I sat there for a while and I thought about it. And the answer was actually nothing. Lots of things. But if you were to try to look back at, maybe 15 years previous, before I started working directly with the plants, and try to pinpoint what it was that would connect me to the world that I live in today and the way that I've made all these connections, you probably couldn't find it. And yet, there is a very, very detailed, specific line that I want to walk you through, because I'm a multi-potentialite. Plain and simple. So you might have heard that term before. If you haven't, you might have heard multi-passionate person, a person with lots of interest, sometimes also associated to flake, or somebody that has just jumps from thing to thing. But I promise you, by the end of this episode, you will understand that a multi-potentialite is a powerhouse, and that having multiple passions does not mean that you have to focus on one, but instead, as I hope that you'll get out of this journey, you will realize that passions can be used and they take you to so many different places. Okay, so let me get you a little bit up to speed with who I am and where I come from and how I got into this crazy little world and this beautiful partnership with my plant friends. So most people that you talk about who are connected to plants in some way have a history in nature, in biology, in something. Yeah, I don't. I really don't. I grew up in a beautiful place. I grew up in South Florida, lots of sunshine, lots of beaches, but plants in and of themselves were the farthest thing from my mind. My mother didn't really have a green thumb. We didn't do any kind of massive landscaping in the sense of going out and gardening. I didn't go out on nature walks. I didn't go camping. As a matter of fact, I didn't build a tent on my own until I was probably in my mid-20s. So to give you an idea of that. But I did have another outlet, and the one that I explored heavily that will tie into the story of how I got connected to plants. And that was music. I wouldn't even call myself a musician at the time. I would today, in a weird sense in some ways, but I'll explain there in a second. But actually, I loved music. Music was my passion. Music was what I was most connected to, not as a musician, but as an extremely emotional, expressive person who understood through music how the world works, who was able to kind of go beyond just the chords being played or the lyrics being sung into the heart and the emotion that was being expressed. So music was one thing that followed me throughout my life. Another thing is, again, remember, multi-potentialite, so it's not going to sound like something you might guess, but it was actually math. I loved math. I really did. I would just get into the numbers, not so much to crunch numbers like for programs. I loved the creativity of the language of mathematics. I loved integrals, and I loved sines and cosines, and I loved really understanding this, so much so that by the time I graduated from high school, I was actually in calculus two, which is really high advanced. I was actually doing differential equations and other levels of high math. So, but I actually had a third passion too that fits in here somehow. Actually, it fits in a lot. And that was for kind of social studies or social work or social situations. So here I am, I have this like side of me that is really into music and the arts. I actually did theater also. I have this other piece of me that is connected to mathematics and the idea of logical reasoning and numbers as a language that allows you to get to a new place. And then I have the aspect of the social sciences, really getting into the social interactions and social innovations that existed out there and what people were doing on a societal level. So, you know, a pretty broad range of stuff. And I really thought I was going to use all that to go into law. So if you go into my own background, I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to fight for social justice. So I was interested in sociology. I was interested in psychology. I was interested in philosophy. I was really interested in exploring all these topics. And at the same time, remember, I have this math background that kind of gives it a logical conclusion, an understanding of steps needed to get to certain things. At the time, I didn't understand it and I didn't really see it as a superpower that I do today. But I really have this way of taking complex, you might say, societal norms and giving them an order that's not constricting. And that we're going to get into that kind of going forward into our future episodes, because I think that's a really important piece, which is that giving something an order doesn't mean limiting it to an order or limiting it to a structure. It's about flexibility. But again, at that time, I didn't know that. Anyways, I'll jump ahead a little bit because I actually never ended up studying law or any of these topics in university. I ended up realizing that this was not the direction I wanted to go to. The injustices of the world were just too much for me. I could not wrap my head around the idea of potentially having to defend somebody who was guilty or somebody who had experienced or judging somebody really harshly based on a series of circumstances that maybe the law doesn't take into consideration. I just really struggled with it. And so I went back and I regrouped and I said to myself, what are some of the things that are really consistent for me in my life? And again, that was music and that was math. And so I ended up studying music engineering and electrical engineering. So remember, social kind of structural mentality in a engineering application connected to a rhythm and a language of musical expression. For me, it was like, it was heaven. I mean, I really enjoyed. There was a lot of parts of it that were very difficult because they were very limiting to me, and I'm not a very limiting person. I'm much more expansive. But the idea of having this structure and this form allowed me to really express myself. And again, I loved music, but I didn't consider myself a musician. The program that I went to, which was amazing, kind of forces you in a good way to be a musician. So I had to really study and bring my piano skills up to par and eventually my singing skills. So people don't know that I actually do or did play the piano and I do still sing quite a bit. But it gave me the ability to be creative while structured. And this balance has been with me throughout my entire life. This ability to kind of marry and move smoothly between right brain, left brain, between the idea of form and function, between the idea of expression and reservation or conservation. So this has really been an interesting piece for me. Okay, I'm going to fast forward because if not, I'm going to get lost in the details because I get really excited about things. I'm going to fast forward. I've had in between there so many different things. I used to work in technology, so places like Real Networks, which was audio and video online, and really the birth of audio and video online. So really bringing that technological, which was the mathematics, ended up turning into technology and marrying that into the music and the arts and the expression and the ability for you to use other means other than the traditional things that we know as traditional musicians to express yourself. So the idea of moving into music and video online and the use of technology to enhance. Note that because it's going to come back when we start talking about plants. So take that, in addition to it, I started to study other things. So I was working in technology. I was doing theater. Remember, multipotentialite. I was, I don't know, I was doing the softball team, and between Microsoft and Real Networks and the various other places of my career, I was also expressing myself through a spiritual path. So I had an artistic path, because when I don't have that, I tend to go into crash mode if I don't have any way to artistically release myself, to creatively express myself. And then I was doing at the same time this whole spiritual side, studying with different philosophies and different expressions in schools. And this is where I eventually became a Kabbalist. So Kabbalah was really my number one love in really understanding, helping me understand the way that the world is structured. So mathematics turns into technology. Music turns into creative expression in the arts in general. There's a lot of other stuff that happens in there, but I'm not going to get into the details. Spirituality starts to take hold with the foundation in Kabbalah and with a kind of coating of ritual magic. These are my expression points. I'm going to fast forward really quick through a few things so that we can get to the plants. I eventually co-owned a circus, thanks to some really great friends that I was producing large scale dance parties and events with. So that was my big, and there brought my organizational skills. So technology turns into structure of project management to a certain extent, and release management, and really helping me see the big picture and then manage the fine details. So I have these, again, when we talk about multipotentialites, oftentimes we think about the single passion, but what I encourage you to look at is what is the deep pattern of how that expresses itself. Mathematics and technology and project management to me are all the same thing, from the perspective of it gives a shape and a form to allow me to then see the details in between and what effects those details have. So my organizational skills, my ability to see the big picture and the little details in between, is really an important aspect of what is connected to that form of expression. And so when you're looking at your passions, it's really important for you to understand how you express them, because if not, you get caught up in the idea that I have to focus on one passion. No, you have to focus on how those passions allow you to express something or to carry out a function. When you do that, you can jump between all these different passions, as I have throughout my career. So I'm going to fast forward. I go on tour with Cirque du Soleil, thanks to my partner at the time. I end up in Spain and Lisbon, and Spain and Portugal and a bunch of other countries. I eventually end up in Italy, and as you know, I live in Damanhur, one of the largest spiritual eco-communities in the world. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between there, but we're going to jump ahead. And it is here in Damanhur where I get to meet a musical plant for the first time. And there was the spark of the plant part, the spark that brought together the possibility of me to connect with plants in a whole different way. Because the music of the plants, which is the sort of instrument that the plant was playing, this plant musician was playing, connected straight in to my to my musical background as a language and as a form of expression. So all of a sudden, I was able to understand and hear what the plant was trying to say to me. So my plant communication skills and my plant awareness sort of popped open right there, because the plant was using a medium that I understood too, which was the expression of music. And this then took me on a nosedive, deep, deep, deep into the rabbit hole of how was this plant able to do this? Because remember, I have a tech background, an organizational background. I need to see the big picture in order to understand the details. So I can understand that the plant is communicating with me. I can understand that plants now have an ability to express themselves. But I need to understand, how does this plant mind work? And that's where all of my skills start to shift. All of these deep patterns that I have in organization and in research and in understanding the big picture to understand the details starts to shift into the focus of how does the plant mind work? And more importantly, not just how does the plant mind work, my social studies skills, my social skills about social innovation makes me think, well, wait a minute, if these plants are alive and communicating and conversing with me, then what does that say about the way our society is structured? How can we structure it differently when we recognize plant personhood? How can we understand different aspects of the plant mind in order to better understand how our own mind works and to build a society where we're not willfully destroying things or ignorantly destroying things, but because we're creating, because that's the way the natural world works. So you can see that it's kind of a convoluted little tale, but where it gets me to is an understanding not just of the plants and everything that the plants have taught me individually, but also of myself and how all of these passions that I've had, that luckily I nurtured all of these years, never negating one or leaving it behind or feeling like I had to focus on only one thing, had given me the toolboxes that I needed, all these tools inside multiple kinds of toolboxes, spiritual toolboxes, technical toolboxes, emotional toolboxes, expressive, creative toolboxes. These various toolboxes had lots of different tools that as I started to work with the plants, I could then pull from and better understand. So that's kind of a little bit of a very condensed version of my background to help you understand not just about me, but also about the different, what's the word I'm looking for? This is like my pattern. What's the word I'm looking for? Because I have all these plants around me who are trying to like yell, and I'm trying to figure out what exactly, how I can put it into words. I think to better say is that to find these bridges, to create these bridges between one thing or another, to be able to see things in a different way, you have to use all of your skills, all of your passions. And it really does it takes courage. It takes vulnerability to show up as your authentic self, to say to people, this is who I am, and to use all of those skills. The path is really unique for everyone. I mean, I just told you about my path, but you have yours that's probably equally as intriguing. And this is why 2 years ago, I founded the Naturally Conscious Community. I wanted a place where nature conscious minds could have a really safe space to explore a deeper connection with the plant kingdom. I wanted a place where ultimately, okay, all of a sudden there's a bunch of noises going on around here. I don't know if you can hear them, but if you can, I'm sorry. But I wanted a place where ultimately you could really express your true, authentic nature. I wanted a place online that had guidance and mirrors and support from not just me, but also like-minded individuals that are on a similar journey to help you really lead the life of impact. Because I feel like this is ultimately it, right? We want to express our complete talents and really live that impactful life. So the Naturally Conscious Community is a place where you won't ever have to walk your multi-passionate life alone again. You'll have support from humans and plants, and you'll be able to step closer to living that life with more purpose, with more meaning, with more harmony. It's just a place where you can be yourself, and you can take these winding roads and you could build your ecosystem in multiple directions. So you can build your personal ecosystem, you can build your business ecosystem, you can build a combined ecosystem, you can really express yourself totally. So I hope that you've enjoyed this journey. I have a whole series of new episodes coming up after this. I've got a list that are just so amazing, connected to our next plant-inspired masterclasses, but to also other things that are happening in the Naturally Conscious community as well. So if you want to blossom, I highly encourage you to join our Naturally Conscious community. Seriously, there is no place like it online or even off. So all you have to do is go to community.tigrillagardenia.com in order to see it, in order to find it. I will add everything into the description show notes. And well, that's it for now. That's it for this episode, which is episode 4. Wow, I'm so excited. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe, to rate, to tell your friends about it. The ripple effects of the positive growth really begins with you dropping your seed into the mix. So I hope that you will join us in the Naturally Conscious community, and I will see you in the next episode.